Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are undertaking quite a critical mission, I think. We're looking at this huge disruptive shift happening in residential real estate. It's all driven by these companies offering instant cash offers, the iBuyers. We've got this stack of sources, research, technical specs, economic analysis, and we're going to distill the crucial insights you really need to know about this new market force.
Yeah, and the basic idea behind the iBuyer model, it's pretty straightforward, but also quite radical when you think about it. Selling a home the traditional way is just. It's long, it's uncertain, and frankly, incredibly stressful for most
Yeah.
people.
Right.
So what iBuyers offer is this direct, technology-driven shortcut. Our goal today really is to get past the marketing slogans and examine the core trade-off baked in this model.
The trade-off being.
You're basically exchanging the potential for getting the absolute maximum profit for getting maximum convenience and, crucially, certainty.
Okay, so our mission overview for you listening is to provide a really clear-eyed, almost technical understanding of what this iBuyer proposition actually is. That means we need to break down the underlying economic models, look at the specific the property technology that even makes this possible, and calculate the true costs and benefits for the seller. Costs that might be, well, hidden sometimes.
Exactly. And if we kind of zoom out for a second, what's fascinating here is you're seeing this introduction of a wholesale and retail dynamic into something that's always been intensely personal, almost always a retail-only kind of transaction,
Yeah.
selling your home. The iBuyer is basically trying to acquire inventory homes at wholesale speed and scale. They're betting that the convenience they provide is valuable enough that sellers will accept a lower price than they might get on the open market.
That's a really interesting frame. Wholesale versus retail for a personal asset. Okay. So before we jump into celebrating the disruption, maybe we should properly understand the context, the sheer inefficiency of how things usually work. Why would someone even gravitate towards an instant offer, especially if it's lower? I guess it's because the traditional process is just defined by so much friction and uncertainty, right?
Precisely. It's almost like the traditional selling process actively violates one of the most basic laws of like behavioral economics or habit formation, the rule that says make it easy.
Uh-huh.
The current way most people sell houses just piles friction upon friction.
Yeah.
All these steps stand between the seller and what they actually want, which is cash in hand and the ability to move on.
And that friction kicks in right away, doesn't it? Just the time commitment alone. Selling a house often requires this serious investment of time and skill. It's something I think a lot of people underestimate. You're basically taking on a new job temporarily.
Yeah, a difficult one.
A difficult, high-stakes job where you're suddenly a project manager, a stager, a negotiator, a cleaner.
Everything.
You have to commit yourself fully to managing what is, at its core, a complex sales process. High stakes, too.
And then, assuming you even get through that initial preparation phase, you hit the negotiation gauntlet.
Yeah.
And that just introduces this massive layer of uncertainty. We know from, reports from real estate agents, they deal with dozens of common objections every single day.
Yeah.
And these aren't just minor quibbles. They could be real challenges to the whole deal.
Yeah, you mentioned like 40 common objections agents face. A lot of them seem to boil down to anxiety about cost and commitment, right? Things like, can you cut your commission? Or we want a shorter listing term. But for the seller themselves, the real stress must come from dealing with buyers who might be evasive about their down payment or just seem flaky, like they have commitment issues.
Absolutely.
That fear, the fear that the deal you spent maybe 2 months preparing for is just going to collapse at the 11th hour. That's a huge stressor. And that uncertainty, it must have a kind of financial price tag attached to it, even if it's just psychological.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
But even before negotiation, the physical and emotional prep costs, that's where the friction really starts grinding. The amount of work just to get the property listed is immense. If you want to boost your chances of selling quickly and maybe for a bit more money, all our sources really emphasize how necessary staging is.
Staging, which is basically about depersonalization, right? You have to erase yourself from the house so the buyer can picture themselves living there.
Exactly. You have to create these carefully constructed little scenes, these vignettes, as some call them, little perfect snapshots to help buyers dream about their life in that space. And that takes significant effort. And, let's be honest, a degree of emotional detachment from a place you probably feel quite connected to.
And the staging itself introduces these really specific, sometimes physically demanding friction points. You mentioned sources detailing mandatory removals.
Yes, things like getting rid of any furniture lining the walls.
Hmm.
We call them sideliners. Buyers need to see the walls, the actual room dimensions, not just the back of your sofa. You have to clear out hallways completely, remove those freestanding bookcases, the massive entertainment centers that just swallow up space. It's like temporarily rearranging your entire existence.
And then there's the whole repair dilemma. Sellers are often caught in this bind, trying to do just enough visible stuff without getting bogged down, but knowing an inspection is coming. The advice seems to be focus on the small, visible, fixes the low-hanging fruit, but leave any major issues found during an inspection to the professionals.
Right. And the reason for that is all about liability and credibility. If a big repair, let's say fixing a leaky roof, shows up on the inspection report, the owner absolutely should not try a DIY fix. Seeing evidence that the owner tackled a roof repair themselves, your source said it will strike fear into the heart of any buyer because it just screams amateur job and raises flags about potential hidden damage down the line. The buyer instantly worries about liability, poor workmanship, the whole 9 yards.
And you mentioned those visual friction points, too, things that just subconsciously put buyers off, like a big visible gap on a stair landing, maybe. Or worse, something like mold.
No, mold is a big one.
Yeah.
If you've got active mold, the sources are really clear. Any patch bigger than about 10 square feet is absolutely not a DIY job. It needs qualified remediators, professional containment, clearance testing afterwards. It's serious business.
So the traditional model basically forces the seller to shoulder all this burden, the physical labor, the emotional strain of depersonalization, the financial risk of fixing things or offering discounts, and all of that without any guarantee of a sale at the end.
Really is the ultimate high-friction transaction, and this is the specific pain point that the iBuyer model is engineered using technology to just completely eliminate.
Okay, let's unpack this then. If the traditional sale is defined by, well, chaos and friction, how does technology fundamentally change that? How does it transform the complexity of the sale into something approaching a zero-friction experience?
Well, it really boils down to property technology.
Yeah.
You have to understand that iBuyers aren't just real estate companies in the old sense. They're fundamentally technology companies that happen to operate in the housing market. They're key players in this massive wave of tech-driven innovation that's reshaping how property is bought, sold, managed, everything. And technology is what allows them to standardize and scale a process that used to be incredibly localized and subjective.
So this tech approach, it sounds like a textbook application of what some call the entrepreneurial model, right? Creating a standardized system. Instead of relying on individual agent personalities or, local market quirks that introduce unpredictability, iBuyers create the standardized franchise prototype. It offers order, predictability, a simplified system to the customer. You're not really dealing with a person's schedule or mood. You're interacting with a platform designed purely for efficiency.
Exactly right. And that efficiency is built around this vision of where things are heading. The single dashboard model for real estate.
Yeah.
Both the consumer side and the corporate side are pushing towards this truly streamlined experience. Imagine where everything from the initial search and getting an instant valuation to integrated title, escrow, maybe even contractor management is all centralized.
Yeah.
That's the goal of a lot of prop tech, because minimize the number of different third parties and hoops the seller has to jump through.
And the most immediate, tangible benefit for the seller is just this dramatic reduction in effort and time spent, isn't it? It leverages that core behavioral principle we talked about. Make it easy, make it instant. It's almost like applying the principles of, say, the 4-hour work week, but to selling your house. Eliminating all that time wasting back and forth.
The scheduling nightmares, the communication delays, the endless negotiation cycles, the closing delays. Yeah, it bypasses almost all of that friction that characterizes a traditional deal.
So the cornerstone of making this speed possible must be the algorithms they use for valuation, these automated valuation models, the AVMs.
Oh, absolutely critical. We cannot overstate how important AVMs are to the whole iBuyer concept. These aren't just simple online calculators. They're incredibly complex systems. Their main advantage is minimizing the human elements, subjectivity, bias, simple errors that can creep into traditional, often broker-led valuations and introduce inaccuracies or inconsistencies.
Okay, let's dive into the AVMs a bit more because that's where the precision, or at least the claim of precision, comes from. How do they actually work? What kind of data are they crunching to spit out a near-instant offer?
It's a massive data aggregation and analysis effort. They look way beyond just recent comparable sales or comps. A sophisticated AVM is pulling in huge amounts of geographic information system data, GIS data. Think about things like flood zone maps, school district performance ratings, proximity to planned infrastructure projects, like a new highway or transit line.
Okay.
They analyze hyperlocal comps, but factor in really granular details like, is the house on a busy road? What's the specific shape of the lot? Is it a corner lot? They even integrate predictive maintenance data.
Predictive maintenance data, what does that mean in this context? They can estimate future repair costs.
Exactly that. If the algorithm knows, for example, the average lifespan of an HVAC unit in a specific climate zone, and it sees from property records that the home's HVAC was installed, say, 18 years ago, the risk of imminent failure is quantified. It becomes a number. And that risk, that potential cost, gets factored immediately into their calculation for the offer price.
Yeah.
This ability to quantify future liabilities and even things like local market volatility allows the iBuyer and, importantly, the lenders or capital partners working with the iBuyer to make decisions with much greater accuracy and confidence than before.
So this precision, this quantification of risk, that's what underpins the ability to make that firm all-cash offer so quickly. The minimized risk of unforeseen costs for the iBuyer means they can issue a binding, rapid offer with a level of certainty that the traditional market, which relies on slower appraisals and individual buyer loan approvals, just can't replicate. It's an efficient, tech-driven system designed purely to acquire inventory at scale and speed.
Yes, but, and this is an important but we need to address, there's a potential blind spot. Can the algorithm miss the human element, the nuance? AVMs are brilliant at processing quantifiable data. They struggle, though, with subjective factors. They might undervalue a home that has unique, really high-quality custom finishes that don't fit standard categories, or they might fail to capture a sudden, very localized surge in demand, perhaps caused by a specific event, something a really sharp, experienced local agent might pick up on immediately.
Right.
So the iBuyer model explicitly trades the potential upside you might get from that human insight, that local savvy, for the certainty and speed of the algorithm.
And that distinction, certainty over potential upside, that seems absolutely critical when we start looking at the money involved.
The financials. Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture now, really understanding the math, the structure of how an iBuyer makes its profit, that's the key to accepting why their offer is almost always going to be lower than the absolute maximum the open market might yield. That instant convenience, the fact that they absorb the risk, that's a service. And you're paying for that service, essentially, through the discount embedded in their offer.
So it's like a classic investor's formula, the kind of house flipper might use, but maybe applied in reverse. They start with the end point, the price they think they can eventually sell it for after fixing it up, and then work backwards.
Exactly. They have to calculate the after repair value, the ARV, that's their target retail price. Then they just ruthlessly subtract every single anticipated cost. Costs associated with the renovation, the cost of holding the property while they fix it, transaction fees, and their desired profit margin. Only then do they arrive at the maximum purchase price they can possibly offer the seller.
So the core formula driving that cash offer is pretty rigid for the iBuyer, isn't it? It's like ARV minus rehab costs, minus fixed costs, minus desired profit equals the max purchase price.
That's precisely it. It's non-negotiable from their business model perspective. So when you, as the seller, accept that immediate cash offer, you are consciously sacrificing the potential difference between that full market value, what maybe a bidding war could achieve, and this lower calculated purchase price. Their entire business is structured around buying at a wholesale level and then selling at a retail level after doing a systematic, controlled refurbishment.
And those rehab costs you mentioned, that's where a big chunk of the justification for the lower offer comes in, right? The iBuyer isn't just planning for a quick coat of paint and some nice staging like a regular seller might. They're factoring in the real costs, materials, labor, permits, and importantly, the risk for potentially major expenses. Things a traditional seller would likely try to avoid dealing with directly or just offer a credit for. This has to justify their fee structure, too.
Absolutely. We should probably look at some concrete examples of these major costs that really drive that initial offer figure down. Think about the exterior, huge for curb appeal. Siding replacement is a massive potential expense. Costs vary wildly, not just by region, but by the material itself. Are we talking vinyl, fiber cement, wood? The iBuyer has to budget for replacing that siding if it's damaged, outdated, or just visually drags down the property compared to the neighbors. They need the flipped home to be competitive.
Okay, siding. What else? What about internal systems?
HVAC systems are another huge one. This is a complex mechanical system, and a failing one can absolutely kill a traditional sale or lead to big price reductions. Just for a medium efficiency furnace, coil, and compressor, The main components you might be looking at $3,000 to $5,000 just for materials and installation. But then, what if the ductwork needs modification or replacement? Maybe the old system was poorly designed or it needs changing for a renovation. You could easily add another $1,000, maybe $3,000 to that bill. These are not cosmetic fixes. They're necessary, capital-intensive repairs.
Right, serious money. And skilled labor needed too.
Definitely. And interior finishes also play a huge role in their calculations. Take refinishing hardwood floors, for instance. That's not just a quick clean and polish. It's a multi-step process. Sanding everything down to the bare wood, applying stain evenly, then multiple coats of sealant. And crucially, it's priced strictly by the square foot. The iBuyer knows these costs down to the penny, and they budget accordingly, often assuming a worst-case or near-worst-case scenario to protect their profit margins.
And maybe most importantly for the seller's peace of mind, the iBuyer takes on the risk of those really complex, potentially scary maintenance issues. You mentioned mold remediation earlier.
Yes, that's a perfect example. If the AVM flags risk factors for moisture or mold, or if their quick inspection confirms it, the iBuyer has to budget for dealing with it properly. If the effect...
Okay. And finally, there are the fixed costs, right? Beyond just the rehab work itself.
Exactly. The iBuyer internalizes all those transaction costs that the seller normally pays in a traditional sale, but avoids here. Think about the real estate agent commission. Usually around 6% is a common benchmark the seller would have paid. Plus, title insurance fees, escrow fees, and then the significant holding costs, things like property taxes, insurance, utilities, for the entire period the home sits vacant while they renovate it. Could be weeks, could be months. All these are pretty much mathematical certainties that get plugged into that ARV formula, inevitably pushing the purchase price they can offer downwards.
Okay, so we've established the math, the mechanism behind the iBuyer's offer. Now we get to the absolute core economic question for the seller, don't we? Is the certainty, the speed, the convenience, is it actually worth the calculated amount of money you are consciously deciding to leave on the table?
Well, the seller's gain is definitely substantial. You get speed, you get certainty, and you get total elimination of all that friction we talked about earlier. Selling to an iBuyer is probably the most powerful, most immediate way to convert a property, which is fundamentally an illiquid, often high-maintenance asset, into cold, hard cash. Liquid cash. You completely sidestep the whole complex process of finding qualified buyers, scheduling maybe 30 different showings, dealing with negotiations, repairs, all the management challenges.
And that immediate all-cash offer, it eliminates every single layer of uncertainty tied to the buyer's financing, doesn't it? Sellers don't have to lie awake wondering if the buyer's mortgage application will collapse, or worry about buyers who get cold feet after the inspection and try to renegotiate or just walk away.
Exactly. And the speed of closing itself, often, they claim it can happen in as little as a week or two. That's a massive, massive benefit for many sellers. That rapid liquidation potential grabs the seller's attention sometimes far more effectively than a traditional buyer who might promise a slightly higher price but needs 45 or 60 days to close, with contingencies.
And you're essentially paying the iBuyer to outsource the entire job aspect of managing the sale, which, as we discussed, takes real skill and dedicated time. For sellers who are maybe juggling a demanding career, family responsibilities, maybe coordinating a long-distance move, paying a fee to just hand off all that emotional labor and project management, they can often feel like a very worthwhile expense.
It can, but the seller's loss is clear, accepting that mathematically derived lower price. And this is where, classical economic principles kind of collide with modern technology. Normally, in a competitive market, competition forces producers, in this case, home sellers, to pass on any cost savings or efficiencies to the consumer, the buyer. The iBuyer model turns this on its head because the primary value they're offering isn't cost savings for the seller, it's radical convenience and absolute certainty. That's the product.
So it's a very conscious economic decision the seller is making. They're doing a calculation, maybe implicitly, where they value the tangible benefits of the instant transaction, eliminating friction, stress, time wasting more highly than the potential for a higher sales price, a higher price that might only come after weeks or months of effort, uncertainty, and dealing with the unpredictable nature of the open market.
Precisely. They are, in effect, monetizing their time. They're monetizing their emotional bandwidth, their desire for peace of mind. They're literally paying a premium to purchase certainty.
If you look at market studies or analyses comparing iBuyer offers to open market sales, The average amount a seller might leave on the table seems to be cited somewhere in the, 3%, maybe 10% range. It depends heavily on the specific iBuyer, their current inventory needs, the property's condition.
That sounds about right, based on most analyses. And then you have to remember to factor in the service fee the iBuyer typically charges on top of that discount, which might be another 6% to 8%, sometimes more. So the total cost to the seller for achieving that convenience can be quite substantial. It really reinforces that this is a transaction fundamentally built around convenience and speed, not maximizing the seller's profit.
Hashtag fee. Who benefits most and future implications.
Okay, so based on this model, friction-free, fast, but potentially less profitable, the ideal seller for an iBuyer seems pretty specific, right? It's got to be someone who definitively prioritizes speed and a hassle-free liquidation way above squeezing every last dollar out of the sale.
Yeah, that makes sense. So this group probably includes sellers who need quick liquidity, maybe because they're in a tough financial spot, like maybe dealing with significant debt, or perhaps they're underwater on their mortgage. They paid, say, $300,000 for a house that's now only valued at $200,000. They might need a short sale, and the iBuyer speed and certainty offers a guaranteed exit ramp.
That's a prime scenario.
Yeah.
It's also really well suited for heirs who inherit property.
Yeah.
Often, they just want to cash out quickly. They don't want the burden of cleaning out, staging, and selling a deceased relative's home, especially if they live far away.
Right. And the condition of the property itself seems like a huge factor, too.
Absolutely critical. If the home needs substantial, expensive rehab, we're talking those big-ticket items like a new roof, major HVAC work, maybe foundation issues, or that mold remediation we discussed. And the seller either doesn't have the cash, the time, or, frankly, the desire to manage those complex repairs, then the iBuyer proposition looks very attractive. The seller is essentially paying the iBuyer to take a massive project and headache off their hands.
And we shouldn't overlook the investor market either, should we? This model seems like it could really benefit absentee owners.
Definitely. Particularly long-distance real estate investors. People who follow the philosophy of investing where it makes sense to buy, which might be thousands of miles from where they live. For them, being able to liquidate a rental property quickly without the hassle of dealing with tenants, coordinating showings with local agents, managing repairs remotely, changing locks, screening new tenants from afar, the iBuyer offers a simple, clean exit.
Okay, so looking ahead then, thinking about the future ecosystem. The properties that iBuyers purchase, they don't just disappear. They become inventory for the next wave of players, right? Professional real estate investors and flippers.
Exactly. The iBuyer, in many ways, acts as this massive automated wholesaler. They sort of lubricate the front end of the property investment cycle by acquiring inventory efficiently. And the investors who buy these properties from the iBuyers often use quite sophisticated tax and financial strategies to maximize their own returns on that inventory.
You mentioned one really important strategy they use is the 1031 exchange. Can you just walk us through the mechanics of that? Because I think it helps explain why investors are so keen to snap up this iBuyer inventory.
Sure. The 1031 exchange is a section of the IRS tax code. It allows an investor to defer paying capital gains tax when they sell an investment property if they reinvest the proceeds into a like-kind replacement investment property within a strict time frame. This is incredibly powerful because it lets investment wealth grow and compound tax deferred over time. But the rules are very strict. After selling the first property, the investor has only 45 days to formally identify potential replacement properties, usually up to 3.
Only 45 days, that's tight.
Very tight. And then they have a total of 180 days from the initial sale date to actually close the purchase on one of those identified properties.
Okay. So the speed and certainty of buying a property from an iBuyer fits perfectly into that tight timeline, doesn't it? An iBuyer flipped home often comes with known recent rehab work, probably clear title, it's vacant, ready for immediate purchase. It makes it an ideal, relatively low-risk replacement property to meet that demanding 1031 deadline.
Exactly right. It reduces the transaction risk for the 1031 exchanger significantly. And once these investors acquire these properties, they're often held for what experienced investors call the triple play of real estate.
The triple play.
Yeah. Number 1, appreciation potential over time. Number 2, debt paydown, as the rental income covers the mortgage payments. And number 3, positive cash flow, hopefully, from the rent exceeding expenses. Alternatively, instead of just holding, they might turn these properties into BRRRR property.
Okay, BRRRR, that's an acronym for?
Buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat.
Buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. Okay. That BRRR strategy seems like the sort of pinnacle of this investment cycle, maybe. And You mentioned it has significant tax implications, too. How does that work after the iBuyer has facilitated the initial purchase?
Well, the beauty of the BRRR strategy often lies in the refinance step. After rehabbing and renting the property, stabilizing its value and income stream, the investor can often do a cash-out refinance based on the new, higher appraised value. This allows them to pull out some of their initial investment capital tax-free, which they can then use to repeat the process on another property. But maybe more fundamentally related to taxes, if the investor holds that property for more than 1 year before eventually selling it, they can potentially convert their profit from being taxed at their potentially higher ordinary income tax rate. Let's say that's 22% or 24% or higher in some examples, to the typically much lower long-term capital gains rate, which is often around 15% for many investors. So, by acquiring inventory quickly via iBuyers, rehabbing it systematically, renting it out, refinancing, and crucially, holding for that year-plus duration before any eventual sale, they maximize the financial efficiency and after-tax return of the whole process. The iBuyer, powered by PropTech, becomes this systemic force fueling this higher-level investment machine. Hashtag #TechTechOutro.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean, for the average homeowner out there who's maybe thinking about selling, facing that often difficult decision?
Well, I think it means that iBuyers are fundamentally selling a service, maybe more than just buying a house.
Yeah.
And that service is friction-free, time-saving, certain liquidation. Their whole operation is powered by sophisticated prop tech, by algorithms, those AVMs that provide rapid, confident valuations, and crucially, risk assessment. This service clearly has value, but it definitely carries a non-zero price tag. And that cost is reflected entirely in getting a lower offer price compared to braving the risk, the effort, and the time investment required by the traditional open market.
Yeah, it seems the iBuyer model really successfully uses technology to systematically take the chaos, the unpredictability, the friction out of selling a home. They've kind of embodied that systematic, organized, predictable approach you see in like a successful franchise prototype, and they've applied it to the historically messy, localized process of residential real estate. It really feels like a fundamental shift in how people can choose to monetize their biggest asset.
It really is. And maybe the final provocative thought for you, the listener, is this. The true cost of using an iBuyer isn't just that percentage service fee they charge or the discount off market value. It's really the financial value you place on avoiding all that psychological and emotional burden. We detailed the stress of negotiation, the hassle of staging and repairs, the anxiety about a deal falling through. So next time you think about selling, ask yourself, if you could completely eliminate the need to deal with any of those steps, the staging, the showings, coordinated repairs, managing buyer uncertainty, how much is that time, that energy, and that guaranteed peace of mind truly worth to you in dollars and cents? That's the real question the iBuyer asks.